Hello everybody, my name's David Finlay. I'm an organic farmer, diversified into tourism, ice cream, nightmare, and cheese making, which has been a great success as a result of COVID. We've been organic for 20 years, been farming for nearly 35 years in my family farm. Before that, I was 10 years as an agricultural consultant. We are on a journey, and it's been a fascinating journey. We were conventional farmers until '97, and chasing milk and elusive profit. We were looking for a better way to do things, and one of the options we looked at and eventually chose was converting to organic. So we stopped using soluble fertilizers, which came to about 120 tons a year. Vaccines, we only use vaccines as an essential tool where all else has failed. So we don't give any vaccines at all now, 2,500 doses of vaccinations in those days. Herbicides, diluted down, it was about 30,000 litres of herbicides a year sprayed all over the farm onto thistles and dockins and nettles. Insecticides, again on livestock mainly, so insecticides applied to livestock both internally through trenches and also as external pour-ons and sprays. We don't use any of those either now. And antibiotic, well, we've moved to an antibiotic-free dairy herd, mainly because we've been asked to do it by our balancing buyer, OMSCO, who demand that. So we've been cutting out all our dependencies on agrochemicals. And this is a slightly faint, hazy photograph of the farm, maybe call it moody. You'll see there's a vast array of buildings. And on the left-hand skyline, there's the wind turbine. And on the sort of center right is our anaerobic digester. All the cottages have got solar thermal panels on the roofs. And log burning stoves. So we try to utilize natural resources as much as possible. We try to have a closed loop food system so that the waste, the organic waste on the farm, we don't buy any organic waste. The organic waste on the farm is recycled in through our digester. It's composted in the digester as a liquid, and then applied to the land in a very environmentally benign form of fertilizer, and it's very effective. Doesn't smell, and it seems to help enhance our soil organic matter levels. The wind turbine, the wind turbine is it doesn't actually belong to us. It belongs to the local community. We provided the site. This is a shot across the farmland that we farm, and it's very mixed. There's a lot of woodlands, scrub, rough grazings, and permanent pasture. It's all pasture land. We do reseed maybe every 15 years or so, 20 years. So and even then it's minimum tillage. So it's a very long-term lays, which give time for the ecosystems and the soil to come into some sort of healthy balance, we think. There's another shot from the top of the farm. We run from about 30 feet above sea level. We're based down in the southwest of Scotland, and looking out across the Solway. This is looking north as it happens, and it's showing the landscape, sort of hilly land running up into the southern uplands, rocky outcrops covered by permanent pasture. and some nice herbal mixtures in the foreground. Here's the dairy herd. So we've got this experimental dairy project, leaving the calves with their mothers for 5 to 6 months and milking the cows once a day. And we're in the 4th year of that now. We have about 125 dairy cows, and they all keep their calves up until 5 or 6 months, suckling. We're also what's known as pasture fed. So the Pasture Fed Livestock Association audit us, and we are 100% pasture fed, which means that these animals are only fed forage. There's no cereals, no soya, and that's another experiment that we're carrying out, seeing whether we can survive at that level of input, because we're gradually trying to wean ourselves off all external inputs to as great an extent as we can. In the middle distance, there's another reason for taking this photograph, is what's happening to the herbage. Having been organic 20 years, things are changing. We're not spraying, not fertilizing, and our natural vegetation is changing. The balance is changing. And this is probably around early May, and the orange crop, which people comment on and ask us what we're growing, is actually, these are dandelions, and we don't grow them particularly. They are becoming very predominant in the herbage, and they don't seem to be affecting grass yields at all. They flower early May, seed, and then fall back, and the leaves are still there. We harvest them with the rest of the silage or with the grazing, and it doesn't seem to bother anybody. It's beneficial to insects, I guess, bees and what have you. So it's interesting that things are evolving, and we like to see what comes of it, because we're trying to enhance our productivity through facilitating natural systems. Here's a picture of one of the silage fields, and you can see the clovers that are coming. Some of these clovers will be sown, others are just generating themselves from seeds in the dung, what's naturally in the seedbed in the soil. Certainly not using fertilizer encourages the clovers, which of course then is feeding the bees and other pollinating insects. Another interesting development, here's a shot of our grass sward, and you'll see there's a mix of grasses, herbs and clovers, and you'll notice there's a healthy green broadleaf there, which is the dandelion, and in amongst that you can just make out the veins of a devastated plant that we used to spend a lot of time and money spraying every year. You can just see some insect life on these plants, and these are close up, and this is actually the larvae of the green dock beetle. So nature steps in. I mean, they totally devastate these dockins, and to the point where you actually feel sorry for them, because I think the dock does bring something to the mix in the pastures, being deep rooted as they are, and but these dock beetles can devastate the docks that used to be things that we sprayed out toxic chemicals on, and causing all sorts of disruption to the natural ecosystem. So we're just delighted that here again nature is stepping in and creating a balance where we created the imbalance in the past. So it's been a great education. There's another shot of the dock beetle larvae. Then moving on to more insect life. This is various shots of dung pats in the fields. I've got the dung flies on the left-hand side, and then a couple of shots, the centre and bottom right, are dung beetles. And there's 2 or 3 different types of dung beetles. I only managed to capture one of them here. And the dung beetles are just a fascinating part of the ecosystem of dung, and cycling the dung and the nutrients and the um, carbon into the soils. In fact, in that centre one down in the bottom centre there is another dung beetle type small insect there. So these dung beetles are a critical part of a healthy ecosystem in your pastures, and these used to be killed largely when we used drugs and drenches for killing internal parasites in the cattle and sheep, which we don't use now. So we've got a very healthy dung beetle population, which are doing great things to break up the dung pats. And it's fascinating. During the winter, I'm afraid for an RSPB talk, I'm a bit devoid of pictures of birds. But I used to think that the crows and various birds that worked over the old dung pats over the autumn and winter were digging out grains in the dung, but we don't feed any grain now. They're still doing it, and what I realise now is that actually they're digging out the dung beetle larvae who are in the dung pats. So it's and that's scattering the muck around and incorporating it. So it's all part of this ecosystem thing. The top right there is a grasshopper, which just happened to be when I was taking some photographs. Here's a shot of dragonfly, damselfly, I'm not sure, and this is in the ponds that we've been digging on the farm. So we had 3 ponds on the farm. We've got another 3, and what we're trying to do is just try to capture some of the environments that attracted wading birds, because we just don't get wading birds on the farm anymore. I remember as a youngster, the sounds of curlews, oyster catchers, what else was the lapwing, and all these, they were all there on the farm. You see them every year, and I don't see one now. Occasionally I might hear a curlew, but that's usually just passing. So we've managed to somehow destroy the habitats that these birds were using. So we're trying to get them to encourage them back. We've also got land that's dedicated through the EECS system, the agricultural environmental scheme, for way to graze grasslands, when we've created scrapes on the farm as well. So we're trying to redress some of these imbalances that we've created in the wildlife on the farm. So there's another pond shot. Now, interestingly, going back to the fields, grass fields, what's going on in the soil? So we've got obviously the vegetation and the bugs, and but here you can just make out very vague in the center of the photograph there, circles of dark green lush grass in the pasture there. And these are, well, we used to call them fairy rings. You often get mushrooms growing around these edge of these circles. And again, it's just showing the fungal growth, the fungal activity in the soils, which is all part of that healthy ecosystem that's feeding the plants and generating productivity. So it's something that we're delighted to see. We're also on the farm, we're creating tracks. So under the EECS scheme, we've been getting assistance to put in tracks and gateways. We've been putting hard work surfaces and gateways for the cattle to walk in, so they're not poaching the land and creating environmental damage. And also on the tracks, you can just see, and at the gateway there, we use second-hand plastic grass. So we use that to reduce the erosion on the track, and also to make it easier on the cows' feet. We're also putting in where we used to have just crossings for cattle to cross down across the burn, walk across the burn. We've created little bridges and fenced off the burns, so that we're again minimizing our environmental impact on the waterways. So it's all part of trying to protect our natural capital, natural ecosystems. Soil management. So soil management is a very important part of what we do here, because the soil is the dynamo that generates productivity and keeps us in business, we hope, and produces food. The farm is permanent pasture. We've just minimum amount of reseeding and a minimum amount of cultivation when we do reseed. And even when we do reseed, we don't do the whole field. We do it in patches. We try to encourage pasture diversity, so that we've got a mix of natural grasses and herbs in amongst the sown grasses and herbs. That gives us diversity in the root systems and in the soil and also in the ecosystem in the soil. So we're encouraging a healthy, diverse soil ecosystem. We've stopped using agrochemicals, fertilizers, pesticides of all sorts, and I think that has been a dramatic change in the health of our soils. We use rotational grazing, so we rest the grass and then allow it to regrow. That's again generating root growth as well, and all part of encouraging healthy soil activity. We only apply composted waste, so it's either the solid waste as a rotted muck or as anaerobic digested slurry, which is a liquid compost. And that we apply with an umbilical, which is a misspell there, umbilical system, which is a pipe that takes the slurry pumped from the farm all the way down to the fields where we apply the waste, and it applies this digestate, which is about 25% more effective a fertilizer than raw slurry. It doesn't smell, so you're not getting the pollution, you're not getting the environmental pollution into the atmosphere of the nitrous oxides and ammonias, which is the stinky bit. And it's not, as long as we apply it in the growing season, which we always do, it makes sure that all that nitrogen and all that fertilizer values is utilized by plants. And it's dribble bar spread, so it's placed on the top of the pasture rather than hitting a splash plate, which again just encourages the loss of nitrogen fertilizer. And use min-till reseeding, so just minimum cultivations to get a sufficient seed bed, and that gives us soil organic matter. So we've been in a very fortunate position. And when I came home 30 odd years ago, I was aghast at how soil samples were being taken by the commercial fertilizer companies on the farm, and maybe going and taking 2 samples of soil from a field of 20 acres, and I was aghast. So I said, right, part of my job had been to take soil samples as a consultant, so I knew how to take samples, the proper way to do it. And so I sampled. I've done the sampling ever since, and we always make sure we take. I'll take at least 10 samples, even from the smallest fields, and over 20 from the large ones, and that usually cuts out most of the outlying. If you do get a miss sample or miss subsample, then it doesn't throw the whole thing out. And what we've found, so we've been looking back, we've eventually managed to dig out all that data from SRUC's records, because we sent these samples up to the College Institute for Soil Research in Aberdeen to be analysed, and fortunately we got organic matter going all the way back to 1996. So 25 years of organic matter records, which transition across the change from conventional to organic farming. And we found that of the whole farm, there's been the soil organic matter levels were actually quite high, even when we started back in '96. They were over 10% organic matter, it was 11 or 12%, and are now almost 14.5, 15% organic matter in the soil. So we have been able to capture carbon in our soils through being ecological organic farming principles. And that's the equivalent, I'm told, by a soil scientist, but there's a lot of room for argument, obviously, or it seems, that of capturing or sequestering around about 5 tons of carbon per hectare per year, which is quite remarkable. So we're very pleased with that. So soil organic matter, very much a reflection of healthy soil. This shows the farm financial performance over the past 20 odd years of transition from conventional to agro-ecological farming, organic farming. And the profit trend line, as you can see from that, has been actually increasing. This is the numbers there, the writing's quite small at the bottom, but it's before depreciation. I think that's quite important to stress, because we've spent quite a bit of money on the new dairy setup, and with a cheese dairy as well. So we've borrowed a lot of money and invested a lot. So there's quite a bit of depreciation on that. So we've stripped that out. But the overall trend line is positive, which is a reflection of several things. So there's several factors influencing that. The first one is that the land was recovering from our addiction to agrochemicals, and it took that sort of time period before our productivity. So we're looking at about 10 years after converting to organic that the land productivity started to approach what it had been before we put all the chemicals on. And in the meantime, there's always the argument, well, yes, we are getting a big premium for your products from the organic farm. In fact, the farm gate premium for organic was barely covered the extra costs of the inputs. So feeds and seeds were almost double the price of conventional. So between those costs, extra costs, and the administration, there was often there was nothing left from the premium. So the premium really wasn't generating the profit. The other thing that argument is made is that we were getting extra subsidies from the government, because the government always promises to help farmers who deliver public benefits, but this was not the case. In fact, our subsidies from the government were cut. So for every pound of organic aid that we got, organic subsidy that we got, for every pound that we got from that, they took away £2 of our production subsidies. So in fact, we had a net minus in the financial side from government support. So it was primarily down to the fact that the productivity of the farm was returning to what it had been with all the chemicals, forcing the productivity. And the major thing was the cutting costs. So our cost base fell by about £40,000 a year, and that is absolutely dramatic. So that was what was generating the productivity and profitability of the business come the end of the 15 years into conversion. And the final part there, you see a drop off in the profitability. That's because we're experimenting with cow with calf, and we are hopeful that we'll rejoin that trend line this year or next year, because we're starting to get a hold of that. We're 4 years into that now, and we're turning that one around too. So cow with calf, dairying, ecological farming can be profitable, and I'd just like to emphasize that it's due to the productivity and the low cost based system rather than from any market or public support. But all the public do support what we do, but that's another factor. Thank you very much.